You are listening to Good Question, a podcast for the curious by Compassion Christian Church. My name is Blair. This is Marcus. And you guys may remember Roxy from a previous episode. She also does a lot of stuff behind the scenes here, so we are grateful to have her. And she's very important to this conversation.
Super important. The most important.
Wow. In fact, so important that Marcus told me he was more excited about this podcast because Roxy was on it. So,
well, look, we shouldn't say that since my wife was on the last two. All right, so Blair, we're supposed to be bros.
He was the second most excited that he's ever been.
I got thrown under. Yeah.
More so, I felt offended that you weren't just excited that I was emailing you. That was like,
I know,
that Roxy
but
was
that's what went through your head.
Okay.
That's why you didn't think that you just insulted my wife through it too.
Like,
so
it's not like he was excited that I was here and you weren't. It's like that you're here and I'm here.
It's a plus
yes and.
Yeah.
Well, we're starting in a kind way today, you guys. We are talking about and diving into the topic: is God creative? And if so, what does that have to do with us? And kind of how do we talk about God's creativity? How does that play into our make, into who we are called to be, all of those types of things. Mm-hmm. So the reason Roxy's important to this is she's on the creative team here at Compassion.
Yeah.
And a pretty creative folk. So, yeah.
Oh, folk.
Folk.
I like it.
That was a weird way to say that, but I did it.
New work title, graphic design folk.
We'll put it in your lower later.
I love that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to start. Let's just define creativity. Mm-hmm. I did the Google thing again, which is a nature of mine that I'm realizing per episode I do this. But this is what it was defined as: relating to or involving the imagination or original ideas, especially in the production of an artistic work. So let's start with this big question of, is God creative? Which I think we all know the answer to, but let's just talk about, why is God creative? Why do we know that?
Well.
I
mean, I think the most obvious answer is, God created everything from nothing, which means it's the most pure act of creativity we could imagine, right? Like from nothing, everything. So, even a lot of the creativity, which we'll get into later, that like I feel like I express is usually, I feel like my kind of creativity takes something and like adds to it in some way. It's not like purely, out of my head or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, literally the creative act is not only his power to create, it was from nothing. So all things that we see that bring him glory in all of creation are things that came like literally just from the mind of God.
Yeah. And like verse numero uno of the entire Bible is, in the beginning, God created.
Yeah.
So that's like from the get, that's what we're told. Like he is a creator. And all throughout scripture, you find like him referred to as the creator, like capital T, capital C.
So when I talk about this topic, I think it's a good basis for us to start, as God is the source of creativity. Do you guys feel like that's true? And why, like when we think about God as the source, what is important for us to keep in mind when we think about this topic as we dig into creativity?
I think it's an image. When you like, there's from a theological perspective, like there's a lot of conversation I think is interesting when you start asking, like, what does it mean to have been made in the image of God, which is one of the defining characteristics of humanity.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that makes us distinct from anything else in creation. One side of it's a little bit more clear, which is that we are uniquely able to represent God in some way. So we're uniquely able to bring him glory. We're also uniquely able to bring him shame, dishonor, as well, which is part of why sin is so ugly. But then the other side of it is like, but what parts of us are the things that represent like a unique aspect of God? And I know that some of the conversation is creativity, that there are things that humanity does, it produces, creates, that are distinct from like how many other things are very few things in creation besides us that do that kind of thing. And so I think that in one aspect, one of the reasons why creativity is such an interesting topic is because it appears to be something that humans can uniquely do and uniquely do in a way that brings beauty to this world, that brings new things that create that sense of like awe and amazement, whether that's music or art, or a performance of some kind. And I think that that's one of those things that's like, there's something in that reflects God in a way that's unique and pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think there's definitely something to be said for the fact that everything we know is very finite. And our ability to have an imagination and to be creative and to create things is one of the only things that we have been given and gifted that has a source of infiniteness.
Yeah.
That I think like is very reflective of
That's
who God is.
interesting, Rox.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's good. And I love the thought about, you talked about it a little bit, Marcus, but like, does this help us get to know God, the creator, better? Like when we dig into creativity, when we look at it, does it help give us a better picture of the kingdom here, now? When we think about creativity and what God has done and what he has made and all of those things.
I think there's an aspect of that. I mean, I think that it's hard to maintain this kind of thinking, but I do think that there's an aspect of there's an aspect of when you see something beautiful, hear something beautiful that moves you. There's an aspect in that is actually drawing you towards something beyond yourself, something good, something beautiful, something true. And it's hard to put your mind to the fact that something that I think is true, which is often that thing that we feel so drawn to and almost feels like the veil gets pulled back and you experience something that feels beyond yourself in whatever way. That sense of awe that's rare, but when it happens, it's extraordinary. I do think there's an aspect of like, there is a knowing of God in that.
Yeah.
That's hard to pin down, and I bet
Or an awareness.
Yeah, an awareness is that there's another in the fire, I think is the song.
Yes.
That concept of like the things wearing thin between heaven and earth.
Yeah.
Where I've experienced that so profoundly in my own life is almost always attached to some form of music, some form of art, or something in creation that I look at and stand in awe of, which is literally, the design of God himself.
Yeah.
And so,
And like when scripture speaks about like, we are without excuse because like creation
Romans,
itself speaks perfectly towards who God is and declares his nature in general. I think when your mind starts to think in more creative ways, you're able to even more so see within creation how beautiful it is. So like once I began training in the art of, graphic design and all those things, the amount of times that I'll like look at a tree and be like, oh my gosh, the amount of greens in this tree is ridiculous. Like the fact that all of those have been made and they're all different hues, or like just small things within all of it. That's like, man, that's so pleasing and beautiful. And like, none of us would have made that on our own.
Right.
Nothing that we do make. There's nothing new under the sun. Nothing that we make is necessarily inherently new. It all comes as a sub-creator or a co-creator with what Christ has already, or like what God has already given us.
Yeah. So we've already touched on this just a little bit, but like, why does creativity matter to God then? Like when we think about him as the source of this, we talk about the fact that it's the very first verse in the Bible. Why does this topic specifically matter to God?
I don't know. Roxy,
I think
you live in this space, right? I'm sure that part of your like
maybe
part
the question is like, what's the value of this to God?
Yeah, no, I think it speaks directly to his glory, as we've already talked about, like the awe and wonder that comes with it. But also, we may get into this later, but this is something that I'm very passionate about, in the fact that creativity and artistry aren't the same thing. They're in two different lanes, which when we think about creativity, we often think like, I'm not artistic, so I'm not creative.
Yes.
But that's not true. Like the person who works in spreadsheets has created something new. Or if you are an organizer for an event, you have created something.
Yeah.
And so like I tell people all the time, like you are creative. Inherently, we've been made in the image of God, who is the ultimate creator.
Yes.
You are a creative person.
Yeah.
And so when we live within that and like choose to, I don't know, I think a lot of times when we find something that you're like amazed by the creativity of it, it's something that the person who made it had to push the bounds of what was comfortable for them in order to make. Like it wasn't an ordinary thing. And so it almost pushes to the bounds of who we are as humans and brings it closer to screaming at us the glory of who God is.
Interesting. I even think so much too. It's like that idea that like, doesn't it tell us, I think it matters to God because it tells us so much more about who he is. Like you talked about that verse in Romans screams at me too. It's like that idea that like through creation, through what he's created, through who he's created, we get a chance to see a glimpse of his goodness, his mercy, his love personified in another person or in a creation, in a nature setting, in a expression of an artistic gift or ability. Like, I just feel like it helps us see him and know him in a way in which without we wouldn't be able to process in our humanness.
Yeah. I think it also helps us grasp more. As you dig more into it, you grasp more of the nature of God. So take our body, for example, the amount of, the creativity at the surface level of how we all look different and we've been made and, beautiful things of like who we are as people. Yeah. But then there's so many systems and small little detailed things that were created within us that it helps you have a more clear understanding of how the creator of the universe and this huge God can like care about me as a singular person if like he did the broad scope of something, but it goes down so deep to where he thought about every single detail within it.
Well, and like, isn't that true of like how I think he loves the diversity in which he created. Yeah. Like he loves the fact that he created us all to be individual. He created different cultures, different experiences, different climates, all of those types of things. Right? I said that really funny, but like I think all of those things were intentional in him, so that everybody has a box checked or whatever. So I think that was like he gets glory and joy out of the diversity in which he created things. So we've talked about God's creativity. Do you have something?
I don't.
Oh, you leaned in like you were ready.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about God's like why it matters to him, but what does this have to do with us as humans living the worldly experience? Why does creativity matter to us, or how does this impact our relationship with Christ?
I think one part of it is like so I'm the haver of kiddos of the three of us.
Yes.
It is
The haver of
kiddos. Haver of kiddos. Well, we came up with the new title for you earlier, didn't
Graphic
we?
design
Folk.
Folk.
And haver of kiddos.
Haver of kiddos.
Yep.
It's so like fundamental. Like it is so interesting to watch that. I think it's interesting, and like you said, we might get deeper into it, like the whole, artistic versus creative, or maybe another way of like basically fundamentally how good you are at actually producing something, right? Versus the like basic idea with my children are. They move towards I have pictured it in my mind. I am now going to try to make a version of it in this world. I'm going to turn Legos into this. I'm going to turn blocks into this. I'm going to organize my stuffies in such a way to represent this thing in my mind.
To bring God glory in my stuffies.
But there is something I think in us that I suspect the only reason we aren't all doing this all the time is because we get to a place of self-awareness where we're afraid of the judgment of others.
Yeah.
Or the, like, if I'm not good at this, I'm not going to do this thing. And like, man, I'm so glad. I'm so worried about the time when my kids get that outward thing put in them of broken. You're not good at this, and so I'm going to stop doing this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But like, the why is it important to us? Like, I think that part of it is it's worth noting that I do think that it's actually pretty fundamental. This ability to picture something and then try to take it from our imagination into creating something that is either beautiful or a representation of what you think making the world as it ought to be. You know,
Ooh, that's
I do think there's an aspect of that of like impact. It's a way to impact others. It's a way to bring about something that ought to be. These kinds of things I think are like important. Like they can be important. They're fundamental. They start to connect to like the why we exist kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, living on mission, that mission being to bring glory to God, that mission being to make our world, you know, bring the kingdom as it is in heaven, so it should be here, whether that's bringing beauty or whether that's creating things as they should be in our world around us. And all that is probably a much deeper level of thinking about it than more deeply than my kids are thinking about. I know it's more
They actually
deep than
said
they.
all of that
Yeah,
to
I was
you, and
actually.
you're
Yeah, I'm checking my
quoting
notes.
them.
Yeah.
Andrew said that. Tell him this, Dad. There is something like it's there. You know. In fact, I think the lack of it being there as people get older is a repression of something that's there.
Yeah.
You know, for all sorts of
Yeah.
reasons.
There's a book that our team read together called Orbiting the Giant Hairball. And
Title is catchy.
Yeah.
yeah, it's intriguing for sure. But and part of it, it's like geared for people who work in a creative space. But there was a part towards the beginning of it where he talked about how he would go around to different schools and talk to students. And the first graders that he would talk to would say, who of you would consider yourself a creative or an artist? And everyone's hand shot up. Like, I'm an artist.
Yeah.
And then once you get into like 8th grade, you ask the same question, and there's like 2 people that like sheepishly are like, me?
Yeah.
Like, because
But
we've
where are
just,
you going to make your money?
yeah. Graphic design.
Be a graphic design folk.
Yeah. Folk official title. But like Marcus said, we just have decided within ourselves or as a culture that, you know, that's not who we are, or like it's childish to think that.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think there's a difference in childish and childlike for sure. And we talk about that a lot on our team of something that looks childlike, but it's not kiddie. So I think the aspect of us all being creatives or artistic is something that would be of a childlike manner, but it's not like childish to think that of yourself.
Right. Well, and I think too, like when I think about why does this matter, doesn't it matter? Because we are made in the image of God and He is the creator. So if we go back to the beginning where we talk about He's the source of creativity, we're made in His image, we're called to be that too then, right? And so, and Scripture tells us all over the place, we are new creations in Christ. And so if I'm created new, even in the flesh that I live, it probably is pretty important that I continue to create anew and make sure that there is refining and work being done throughout. Like I am a work of art in and of it myself as a creation of Christ. And so it's important for me to continue what God has started.
Yeah.
In my head, that made sense. But I like what you guys are saying. And that thought about, there's a point where you stop. That is like real. Because I, even in our office, because the creative team is near me and I'm not on the creative team. But there is often talk in our office of like, the creatives. And I always am like, I'm not a creative. That's not me.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But like realistically, I love to write. Writing, storytelling, that's creating. And so it's so funny how like there is a piece of me even now that is like, no, that's not me. I would not raise my hand in that class type of a thing. And when does that happen? Why does that happen? Why do we have this shift in our life of that? That's interesting. And maybe we'll get into it a little bit more as we go. But,
and it does, just to note, it helps our team when everyone understands that they are also creative.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
It is prideful of us to think our idea is the best idea every time. So, like I enjoy going around and talking to people, picking their brain, maybe not in a way of being like, what artistic thing are you interested in right now? But just like in conversation, you see those things within people. You find creativity because this is inherently in us. And so when we all decide to live in that aspect of we are creatives, we can paint a better picture of who God is and what he's trying to do, like in that moment or with that project or something like that.
Yeah, so good. I want to go to another question that is being creative a form of worship?
Yes.
I think it ought to be. I think it ought to be. I think that there's the thing about our worship is that theoretically our entire lives can be aspects. It can be acts of worship. How we treat others, how we view ourselves, what creative acts we take, what words we speak. All these different kinds of things. I think so often there's an intentionality and a presence, like being present to what you're doing, being mindful of what you're doing and why you're doing it is part of what helps that be a thing.
Yeah.
Because it's also like in the same way that, which, hey, here's a whole potentially other different topic at some point, but it's, you don't stand silent during musical worship because you can't sing very well, because it's not about whether or not you hit the notes perfectly.
Right.
Your act of creativity should not be limited to whether or not you would be deemed a particularly skillful person in the thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
As like that's not, because that's not what it's about. It's the whole theoretical version of like making a joyful noise is not the same thing as making a perfect note.
Yes.
And my kids' art, which if I showed it to you, we would have trouble determining what it is.
Abstract.
Yeah, right. It's like that doesn't change the fact that there was true joy and beauty. And even in a sense, a glorifying of God in what's going there. And I think a lot of that has to do with your own like mindfulness of what you're doing and what you're doing it for and why you're doing it. Because a lot of it, the whole reason of like, if I were to armchair psychologist this thing, of the whole like, why do we stop? Well, a lot of it just, I think, comes down to us going, well, if the reason that you're doing it is in order to receive the adulation of the people around you, that's why you stop.
Yeah.
Because it turns into, I'm not receiving praise from people, I'm receiving critique from people and critique internally. I don't want to do that. I don't want that. So I'm going to cease doing it, which is a different reason that you could do it as an act of worship or an act of expression in ways that are actually good.
Yeah.
I
think everything we do is an act of worship. It just depends on, like you said, your mindfulness. So like if I don't have a front end alignment on what it is that I'm doing this for, it quickly becomes like, I'm doing this for the worship that I can, like someone can give me, that I can receive that praise of, man, good job.
We're getting
So
into
I'm doing
idolatry.
it for my own,
I like that.
I am the object of what should be worshipped
Right.
because I can produce this thing, rather than this is so that people can look at it and say, like, wow, that brings me awe and wonder, not because Roxy made it, but because like it helps you tap into an infinite, which is who God is. So
which connects to the whole like so the art draws our minds and our hearts to the artist, right? And that whole like we're seeking attention, worship, etc. But it also reflects back to this heart of God thing, which is a version of going, God created in so many of these ways in order for us to look upon His creation and glorify the artist, to appreciate the art, to worship the artist,
Yeah.
in a similar way. If the reason you're creating is in order to bring more attention to yourself, that's interesting, because it is actually also a twisting of a reflection of the image of God, a creation of something in order to bring glory to you. Of course, the reason that works in Christian theology is that if you're impressed with the art and then you're impressed with the artist was designed by someone too.
Yeah.
And so the ultimate train of all of that is always to the Father. Yeah.
Let's go there for a second, because that is one of the questions I do have, is how do we prevent this from being unhealthy, of being a space where, okay, now I'm doing it for my own glory or because I get praise or I get lots of money or whatever this may become. How do we keep it in this healthy space of like using the gifts I've been given to glorify Creator God versus like I'm doing this because I'm good at it?
Yeah. I think this...
Maybe are there guardrails?
I can talk to you about like what I like.
Yeah.
I personally do, which probably doesn't necessarily relate to a ton of people because we're not all graphic designers. But like for me, one thing that I've begun to do that's helped me a lot is any kind of something that needs to be designed, or we're doing a sermon series or something like that that has an aim. I need scripture for it, and so there's so much inspiration and creativity that you can grab from scripture because it's God breathed, like, and everything that He has created, or said or done, like inspires creativity within our own selves. And so, like, making sure I have something that centers me to a thing, that says that this is why I'm doing this thing. And good. So I don't know. How would that apply to your job, Mark, or your job, Blair? What does that look like for you guys? That's just me personally, like what I have to do for it, or keeping scripture around that says like, Lord, may you establish the work of our hands, that we have on the wall in the creative team. And so, just like making sure that's at the forefront, because you can so quickly move to, self-affirmation of what's going on. And so it really is like a mindset. Yeah. Because I could do it and you never know that it is something that I'm doing for my own glory. Like you can fake that until you make it. Yep, you sure can. And that goes for all platforms.
So many, so many.
Behind a screen or on a stage or anything like that. We do have our own abilities, but then like God receives no glory in that. And so like what is that even for? Like what does that mean in terms of significance if I do that? Because praise is so fleeting. Yeah. I can make a graphic and no one remembers what a sermon graphic looked like this time last year. Yeah. If they did, I'd be astounded. I hardly do. Really?
I remember for you. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
I still have your Taco Times original design.
Okay. That was fun.
That was one of my favorites. Yeah.
With the little cherubs holding tacos.
The cherubs holding tacos. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. I do think it gets, and Blair, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, because I see that your creativity and what you write and what you produce and how you design, and put together the things that are done in Compassion Online and all that, it happens with all of us, particularly in the area of ministry, where people will come up to us and be like, "You killed it," right? Blair, and look, Blair's like famous in the lobby.
I am not.
Might literally as well your face is everywhere. What do you mean?
Might as well be a Disney princess, like walking through the crowds of Orlando.
She just like glides.
It's great.
Okay.
As you receive like praise, like what do you do? How do you like process that?
Yeah. I think I'm still learning how to do that, because I did come in from an industry where you did not have to turn it back to anybody else. It was all about you. And so I think I always stood apart out there because I wasn't doing it for that reason. But now there is very much more a feeling of like, nope, this is not me. This is I regularly do. Every time I get out and speak, every time before I do something, I have an internal dialogue prayer with the Lord about like, Lord, these are not my words. Do not let this be a Blair elevation, but like a literal like moment for you to shine in all of your glory. And may I just be the body you take hold of today. Like, and so that has been like the prayer of humility that I'm praying regularly. And if there is somebody who will make a comment to me, I quickly remind and try to remind myself, because I also know that I am a person who, like, words of affirmation are definitely one of my love languages. Right. And so the Lord is so sweet that He speaks those things to me through other people, but they can easily go to a different place, an unhealthy place. And so I have to be really intentional in those conversations for myself to say, that's not me, that's all Jesus. Like, all Jesus, because I couldn't do it, and frankly, I fail all the time at it still. But those are the two biggest things for me, is speaking it out loud to others so that they know, and then also those internal dialogue prayers that I pray. But you're the same way.
Yeah, it's difficult to be weird about, to not be weird about it. You know, I remember there was a period of time. So for those that don't know my work, I mean, with preaching is probably the most like direct. Preaching is very creative art. When you get down to the process of actually how it goes, and so then people will come up and say, "Good job," and it's like, well, I mean, I did spend 20 hours doing that, you know, and there is, so, you know, there is an aspect of that where, and it also, but there's a period of time where it was like, no, it was all Jesus. And then it became a thing where I was like, okay, just say thank you like a normal person, right? And then draw the conversation back to the content that glorified Jesus and away from the, you know, from any compliment towards me directly is usually how it goes. I think fundamentally it's when it comes to all of this, just knowing, like, not just in your brain, but in your heart and at a very deep level, the gospel of, you know, more fallen, you know, in my sin than I can even fully comprehend, more embraced and loved and accepted in Jesus than I could ever imagine. You hold on to that kind of stuff, and what it does is it helps. It just helps keep you from being the center of the story in your own mind and heart, which is what is truly dangerous, right? Because that's where that little me monster eats that up, you know, and it can get bad. When it gets to that point, because that's when you start seeing slights. That's when you get into comparison stuff where you see the good preaching or the good design or the good writing or the good hosting or whatever as like a threat in some way to you or a challenge in some way to you, rather than being able to celebrate that person may very well be more just fundamentally talented than you are, you know, and without that necessarily being something that really messes with your identity. All that kind of stuff, it gets complicated. It's a fight, you know, it's a fight. It's a fight on both sides. I think whenever you get into creative stuff, to not both like make it about you or you're connecting your identity very directly to it. Nor get and that's the like raise it up version, or the version of like I'm constantly feeling cut down because I am trying to compare what I'm doing to what other people are doing. Both of those, I think, gets away from the purity of what creativity can be, you know.
Yeah, so good. And I think that's such a good reminder too. Like, these are all like the things that you're good at, the things that people could compliment you on are typically things that God has gifted you, that he has already given and instilled in you. And he knows these are good things that he has put and placed inside of you. So to live those out well is glorifying to him.
Right.
And it's not a bad thing, but there is a line there, and you've got to make sure that which side of the line you're on.
Yeah. When I was I go downtown now. Obviously, you guys know that, but for those who don't,
the downtown campus.
I go to the downtown
campus.
Yes,
okay.
yes, and I am on the worship team there. But I was previously at our Statesboro campus, and at the time, Harrison was the pastor out there, and he was speaking to the people who were doing worship at the time, and he taught us this concept of excellence and authenticity that I carry into. You can go into all of our lives. So, excellence, like, just because, you know, God's going to love me either way doesn't mean that I don't work hard at what I do for it to be absolutely excellent. Like, when it comes to worship, like, I do need to practice and I do need to know the words and make sure that I'm doing the best that I can be. And, you know, you know, it makes it not distracting for other people when I, you know, hit the right notes. But without authenticity, what does any of that mean?
Yeah.
But also without excellence, the authenticity is like, you know, it means less because it's distracting people from like who God is, if that makes sense. Because it's, again, drawing attention to yourself in a way that probably is not intentional, but like those two things have to.
You don't want that.
You don't want that kind of attention. Trust me. But those two things have to be married to one another. Like you can't have one without the other thing. So in no way do you need to sacrifice one on the altar of the other.
All right, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I think that
Wait, that's my job.
Too
No,
late.
actually,
Too
no.
late. All right, so
No, we're
off
not taking
script. Off
questions at this
script.
time.
All of our prepared answers out the window. All right, so
Teleprompter down.
So I had a lunch with a friend of mine before I came here, and we were talking about how up in our heads we can get about different aspects of our lives. So I wonder, as people listen to this conversation, if what this sounds like is that people either in ministry in places where you're using creativity, or people who are creative in general, are just like constantly doing this, man, like locking down your brain, control your heart. But I'm wondering, like, do you when you're actually being creative, when you're actually doing the kinds of things we're talking about, are you like up in your head about that a lot, or is it just actually like a more living in the joy of God's gifted me to do this, and I enjoy doing this, and I have to be careful every once in a while, but yeah.
So I grew up as a big sports kid, played sports all year round, love sports and just that world in general. And so it's like, example, at practice, I am very concerned about the fundamentals of something. There are times when it's like, you need to work specifically on this part of your swing or this part of your kick, or you're having to put your mind around it. But when you go play, like that's when you're going and living out all the things that you worked really hard for at a time, right? And so there are times when I'm learning new skills or doing all those kinds of things. But just like in worship, there are times when I practice in the back end and like keep your head on it, and then when you go out there, it is the joy of the Lord in which you are doing that in. So I think the same goes for like spiritual disciplines. Like I'm disciplined about some things that I have to be so that I can live in the freedom of them once my mind has gotten a hold of it.
It's a good answer.
That is a good answer.
Blair, are you up in your head a lot?
Oh, all the
time.
I live up there, baby. I live up there. Actually, like literally 2 weeks ago, maybe, I was asked to do something that I don't normally do because my role was changed that week. And I was so in my head about it. And I was in prayer frustrated at myself that I allowed myself to get so in my head about something that I know God has gifted me with. And I allowed the exterior noise or the fear of how I was perceived or how that would come off block me from living out what God has created me to do. And so I am always in my head about it. And I think part of it is like, I know that there are things about my personality, about the way my brain works, about all of that I have to fight against, that I have to like combat. And so I think for me, it's always a battle that I will walk. Even in news, I felt that though. I don't think that it's anything about ministry specific.
Yeah.
I think it's more so, I'm a people pleaser. And I like to make sure other people enjoy an experience. And as a creative who is I'm part of that experience for them.
Right.
I fully take ownership and take on that weight that like their experience depends on my ability to create one.
Yeah.
And that is a weight that the Lord did not intend for me to carry or for me to hold. And so that's something that I do have to lay down at his feet, and I do have to surrender and admit is something that I'm guilty of.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, I think I'm probably not that y'all asked me, but I'm
Marcus,
probably
I have a
closer
question.
to Roxy.
What do you think?
I have rituals. I have rituals, and so I build a little stack of rocks. No, when I'm writing a sermon, I will go on walks like 3 or 4 times over the course of writing it, and a lot of the time it's basically to just go like, okay, stop. You got like flush any of the how are people going to think about me while this is happening. And what in this is something that is like for me and not for the people I'm serving, not glorifying to God. Even in the other like more traditional, that is actually not very traditional, but like the more other creative stuff I do, like paint and things like that. Like I do paint.
I didn't know that.
I'd like to see some of your
I brought some, but
we should have had him live
it's
painting during this.
It's not for the camera.
Next time.
It's not for
We
the
should
camera.
have had him
I'll
live
show
painting
y'all.
during this
I'll show y'all.
episode.
But there's a part of it where like I connect things that I paint to specific things that I'm praying about or aspects of my identity that I find in Jesus. Like I really try to connect what I'm doing in some way to stuff that's actually the most fundamental parts of my life. Because that then helps me not get in my head about whether or not the quality of what I just produced is something that like I'm happy to show other people, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
Because that's not really what it was about in the first place.
I do want to add a caveat of like, because we work in ministry, our work has a lot to do with, we need to, it needs to be specifically minded in this way. But so outside of this, I part-time do work in coffee and I like to dance. And so in those things, when I'm making coffee, my mind isn't on like, how does the Lord feel about this pour? You know what I'm saying? And so it's not necessarily about the thing I'm creating at that moment. It's about how I live amongst the people that I'm around at that time. So that's what's bringing glory to God, that I'm working hard at something and I want, that gives me almost some credibility with those people.
Yeah, it's good.
That I'm hardworking and so they respect me more. And then from that, they can see the platform in which I live my life and that it brings glory to God.
If you had me painting during this, we would have had to have had her either making us
coffee
or dancing in the background.
Or Porque no las dos, just dance while I eat.
The weirdest episode ever. Everyone's tuning in to watch the video.
Supplementary content coming later.
Surprise release. Let's talk about this idea, which I do think is something that's American culture. Being effective versus like in creative world, people are worried about, is this an effective use of my time? All of those types of things. Like, how do we kind of weigh that idea of sometimes you aren't meant to create to be effective? It doesn't have to be that. They don't have to live in the same lane together. They can be different. And does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want
Can't wait for that sound to go through y'all's ear holes.
I guess I'm more so asking, like, does it matter what I produce? Like, we've already talked about this judgment, the fear of what people will receive when I do this. Does it even matter?
I think there is something to be said for, like personal growth in it. I don't know. Maybe this is me being affected by my like surrounding culture, but there's an aspect of looking at my kids and going, I don't care if you end up being like an excellent artist, that your drawings are the kind that make people like, whoa. But it is an aspect of going like, okay, so that was supposed to be a horse. That's not a horse. Let's look at a horse together and then let's go, here's your picture of a horse A, and then here's your second attempt at a horse B. And it's like, hey, it's better. And that's good. That's improvement. That there's an aspect, and I don't know, because that's that version of going like, you're not looking outside of yourself to determine whether or not you're good at it. You're just basically going, my goal was to produce this thing, and my goal was to make it look like a horse. Maybe there's an aspect that I can't improve upon. So I think there's something positive about, from the effectiveness kind of standpoint of like, if the goal is to produce something, I don't think there's anything wrong with working on the craft in order to produce some form of excellence.
Yeah.
I think that if the excellence is going to be determined by how good somebody else is, that becomes problematic. But if you can be doing better at this expression of creativity or artistry, then I think that there's worth in improving upon of that. But I mean, when I originally started painting, I had no intention of showing anybody. Like the goal wasn't like, let me create something for other people to admire. It was a personal expression, and it was I was spending a lot of my free time on hobbies that produced nothing in this world. right? And there was an aspect of going like, I don't like that. I don't like that. I want there to be a result of some kind. I want something to be created in what I'm doing. And so originally that was like the genesis of it, rather than some kind of like effective having other people see it or what I'm producing being awesome. It was just like, well, what I know is that I can point to the last, year of time I've spent gaming or, well, primarily, gaming and
Gaming or
watching TV or whatever. I just like, how many hours am I spending doing this? And there's nothing to show for it. And I wanted something to show for it. So that was kind of, for me, it wasn't about effectiveness. It was just about like, I want to produce something. I want to create something.
Right.
Yeah.
I think in my world, those aren't verses for me. So, for as a graphic designer, like art makes you ask questions. Like what does this mean? But good graphic design answers questions for you before you know that you have the question. So, in like using creativity is my way of being effective in my own job. So they like are in tandem with each other. I also think that could work across a lot of platforms. Like explain what you mean when you say the word effective so that I know how to answer this.
It
Webster's
meets a
define-
purpose.
oh, sorry.
It meets the need and it fills a gap that already existed.
Yeah. So I think the things that have most affected your life, the things that you remember, are things that were not ordinary, that were not just like everything else that you had seen. And so creativity went behind that. So if it's going to be its most effective, I think creativity is a part of it
It's
in
interesting.
and of itself.
Can I ask you a serious question, Roxy?
Yeah.
So, Roxy always does these really intentional designs that she has a whole reason why she chose the thing she chose. I'm going to give an example. So, if you were around for Christmas of this year, we had a beautiful light refraction. And the reason behind it was Roxy was talking about like the fact that God is the source of light, and through him we see all of these colors. The world is magnified because the light of the world came to be with us. Is it ever like discouraging or heartbreaking that like
That people
no
don't
one gets
understand
that? They just saw it as like some light.
Oh, wow. Cool. Yeah.
These blockheads like me just go like,
Why'd we do that? That doesn't have anything to do with Christmas.
Wow.
that's too many
weird.
colors.
Yeah.
Get rid of it. Don't like it. I mean, it can be sometimes if I
I just honestly thought that because you have these most beautiful pitches, Roxy, when you give us these designs that look so wonderful and you're like, this is why they did that. And then when I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my gosh, it makes so much sense. It's beautiful. But like to the average Becky,
or Joe.
I didn't want to pick on Joe again. I chose a different name. But like, I was just like,
Sorry for all the disrespect, Joe. But
why?
to the average,
Why?
Yeah.
Nobody
Our
knows
bad
that.
Becky.
Yeah, I think there is an aspect of there are things that make impressions upon you that are subconscious. So, example, like in color theory, there are colors that are just pleasing to your eye. Like we have no explanation of why, but these colors go together in a way that we like. And there's some colors that are just like, ew, like I can't, absolutely not. Like I don't like that. And so, but I mean, you don't think about it anytime you see like two colors that clash. You don't think like, oh, this is
Sometimes
what,
I
you don't get into color theory because of it. You know what I'm saying? And so there is a level of stuff that is impactful passively, if that makes sense. And so,
So you're cool with it.
if I could make something that like in any way could, make an impact, then I'm going to do that.
Becky liked that, whether she wanted to or not.
Yeah, I'm going to
Yeah.
make Becky like this.
Becky will like me. I mean, my design. I mean, yeah.
No, it was something that I had to like. I am now getting to a place of it, but it took a long time to accept. Like, I will never make something that everybody likes.
Yes.
It's impossible. And
Which
so,
does speak to that idea of effectiveness, right?
Yeah.
I think
It is impossible. Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
hard thing.
I
to
had
come to
someone talk about how they didn't like something that was designed, and so I guess she didn't know that I was the designer,
Oh.
and so
Oh my
I
This was awkward.
No, I know,
That's
but
awesome.
I said like, oh well, like I did it for this reason, and like it goes, it wasn't designed like just for this one person, like it's for a bunch of different things, and she, and so that was a moment where I think that was like I remember it because it was one of the first times that I was like, I can't make something that pleases everybody. There are some people that were like, "This is sick,"
Yeah.
and then she was like, "Who picked this color? This is
Right.
ridiculous."
Yeah.
So like, I literally can't do
Yeah.
it. It's not within my willpower. So if I hang my hat upon, the affirmation of other people, there's always going to be someone who doesn't like it, or there will always, if I play the comparison game, there's always someone who's better at it than I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
I sit and look at that, then I'll never make something to the best of my ability.
I think there's also the danger of when it comes to creative stuff,
The creative,
the
though.
creative process. We get to the point of like effective means people like it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And like that's definitely dangerous as well. And I mean dangerous in the sense of just your own, heart and mind.
Yeah.
Right. The effective.
To the
being,
nature of
people
why
love
you
it
made
or
it.
like it. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk. I think I got two more things. Let's go to comparison trap because you already started there, and I think are sitting in that vein. So, comparison trap is that idea.
We're now gonna post up pictures on the video version of Roxy's design versus other people's design.
Yeah, we've
and we're
brought
gonna
in some designs from
actively-
some of the best world-renowned graphic designers, and we're going to put the two on the screen. And y'all
got
pick
a
which
r-
one you
record-
like
Which one do you like the
more.
most?
We've got a recording of Roxy's vocals versus
please, no.
Celine Dion here, and yeah.
Miss Celine would put me
So
to
the
shame.
idea of comparison trap is
Miss
really
Celine.
that process of like, okay, I'm comparing myself to someone else who is of insane value, or maybe I think they're less than whatever. The weight of how we roll those two things together and how it affects our ability to continue creating.
Yeah. So there's this book that's a really small read. I would encourage you all to go read it, The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. And it talks about pride in the form of inflation and deflation. Yeah. So my eyes are still on myself. So if I try to, if I want to just compare myself to people who I deem not as good at the craft as me, then my pride is inflated. But if I like look at someone who's, clearly on a different level than I am, my pride has deflated. And so you're constantly doing this, if so, and you're never at a place of rest when you do that. And so it talks about you need to be filled with something solid that like isn't so fickle that it changes all the time, because there's literally like no peace and joy that comes from that. You constantly just spiral from getting a really big head and being like, I am the best, or being like, I suck, So.
Yep. Yeah, so one of my favorite, I've taught on comparison a lot because it's one of my favorites, and I think it's a real danger to all of us because it's essentially the reason for why social media is like clinically proven to lead to depression. Overuse of it, at least, is because of comparison, and it's my favorite thing is the one that I stole directly from Andy Stanley, so it's not my own creativity.
Yeah,
it's a
the Marcus Johnson,
reapplication.
Andy Stanley.
Yeah, via Andy Stanley. By the way, if there was someone to compare yourself to make you feel bad as a communicator,
Andy Stanley.
be Andy Stanley.
Yeah.
He calls it the land of There's always someone pretty more talented
language. That's
rich better at whatever it is that you're doing. And so, and of course, there's the opposite. You can always find someone to make yourself feel better about yourself, right? You can always do that too. Yeah. And so, that is the trap, is that you get caught in this place of either pushing other people down so you can climb up, or allowing other people, instead of celebrating the fact that they have great talent and giftedness, they can bring glory to God in many ways. Instead, you make it about yourself. And both things are bad. It turns out.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, believe it or not. I know that takes a lot of convincing. I think that it's profoundly difficult to not put yourself in that position, though, because in almost any creative process, which again can bring our minds back to God and have a greater love for Him. But in almost any creative process, you're pouring yourself into it in some way. Yeah. And so to have someone judge it or even to put it in a position of that's part of why it's so tempting to like want to find great worth in this thing that you've made. That temptation is a difficult thing to fight against. And so I think that's a difficult part of it. But man, like I also believe that if you kind of go back to some of the things that we talked about earlier about really making sure that while you're in the process, you're connecting your mind and your heart to why you're doing what you're doing, then it's difficult to avoid comparison. And it's frankly almost impossible to prevent other people from comparing. You know, I can't tell you how many times someone's compliment to my preaching has been connected to a comparison to me from me to somebody else, whether positive or negative.
Right?
Even when like a common one is like you're almost as good as Cam or whatever, and it's like, thank you, and also like it's like I don't know, it's just it's always odd, but I think it's so natural for us to do that kind of thing, and it's you got to be solid in who you are.
What a good reminder, though, that we can't control other people comparing, but we can control what we can do. Yeah. And so those are two different things that we do have to separate and hold them differently. Yeah. Because I can definitely guarantee other people are going to compare me to somebody. Right. But I don't hold that. And I can't carry that.
And often it's a massive compliment. I'll take almost as good as Cam any day of the week. Any day of the week. It's meant to all day. Never lost. But part of the challenge is like it is so natural. Yeah. It's so natural, for us to kind of to just rank things. Yep. And so it's difficult to do personally, and it's difficult to avoid in others.
Yeah. And it's hard whenever you're like, I'm gonna live this way. Yeah. And the rest of the world is like, I'm not gonna do it.
You're not.
Well, how am I supposed to do it if no one else is gonna do it with me?
That's right.
Come on, guys, we're all gonna not compare.
Yeah. Let's finish in this idea of we know that there are people who are listening to this podcast, or maybe they didn't even press play because they're like, I'm not creative. This isn't interesting to me. What would you say to them? What would you encourage them in on A, that yes, you are creative, and B, how to think differently about creativity? Yeah. In this.
I think I would go back to, I talked about it earlier of like, we are all creative and that doesn't look the same. My type of creative is a different avenue of creative. Yeah. I couldn't write scripts and stuff like you do. I'm not a communicator. Those are creative things, but I'm creative in a different lane. And if I am a fish, if I am a fish and I try to compare myself to the flight of a bird, I will always fail because I'm built for something different. Yeah. And so, I'd say like just try to mentally take like a inventory of places that you can find creativity in your life. So even to the small things of like, I don't like to rewear outfits. I like to put together different outfits for every single day. And that is a creative avenue. These guys have never seen me in this outfit before. It is new. It's
true.
So I created something this morning when I did this.
You're right.
And I used creativity to do such a thing. Or like when you're making food like that, you're being creative. And like I said, with the coffee stuff, that doesn't mean that like, as you make food, you have to be like, Lord, this garlic was made from your hand. And like, I do this to glorify who you are. Like, it's just, don't do that. I mean, you could, but it's just kind of weird. But, like you're just inherently speaking, like, echoing who God is in all of the things that you do. And that's beautiful. And you don't have to be like over obsessive about it. You can live in the joy of how fun it is to cook or to make a new outfit. Because when I put this outfit together, I didn't think, I wasn't like spiritual about it. It was just like, I was being creative, and that's fun. Because God's given me the ability to do such a thing. So,
yeah, comparatively, everyone has seen me in this outfit like weekly.
You creatively
Weekly.
put it together at one point, and you said, "This is good."
This is good.
Nope.
And you
He
said,
said,
"This
I
is
did
good."
not. No.
Just like the Lord.
No.
And it was good.
No.
And
And
it
I'm
was
going to
good.
keep using
Like
it.
earlier when
No.
he told us that he gets a new pair of these exact shoes every year. He said,
what?
"These are good. These are." He gets.
I didn't know that you
Okay,
said that.
so I get the same pair of shoes for Christmas. This is
Every
like
year?
4 years in a row, 5 years in a row.
I could not. I
And this
could
just goes
not.
to prove that people are creative in different
Different
ways,
ways.
and he's
That's
a
right.
really great communicator.
That's right. Yeah. And so if I were like, if I were like, hey, I'm gonna figure out a new way to be creative, I wouldn't start with like fashion.
Yeah. Well, this is a good point, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm about to push a table over.
Yeah, it's fine.
So I do think that there is an aspect of just opening your mind a little bit to literally, like, it doesn't have to be design, it doesn't have to be drawing something,
Doesn't have to be
or it doesn't have to be artistic as much as, I mean, there are people that in the way that they approach yard work
Yeah.
is creative,
Yeah.
in the way that they approach what they wear is creative, in the way that they approach how they put, how they like interior design kind of stuff, like
Engineers.
I mean,
Yeah.
like whoever put together, whoever decided to put all these little things in the background of this room that you can't see on camera, so I don't know why I referenced it.
But if you watch on Sundays or Wednesdays, you could see them in the
Yeah,
background.
you'll see all of Blair's favorite movies.
Shameless plug. Join us online.
That's true. Yeah,
But
good.
but it, to your credit, no matter what your craft is, what your vocation could be, there is a way to use creativity. Because if we go back to that original definition that I read at the start of this episode, it was literally relating to involving the imagination or original ideas. So it has not as much to do with artistry as we think it does, or we make it about, and more so just about doing something new in a different way, trying something else, and seeing where it goes.
Yeah, and I think there's I do think that genuinely, like when I started painting, it was not a like, you know what, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a painter, and then it wasn't that. It was I feel like I'm wasting my time. I want to invest time in something creative. There's this scripture that I'm pretty sure I'm misinterpreting. It doesn't matter in this particular case. It just came to mind.
He's like, it doesn't matter.
Paul
clear.
basically, yeah, don't take that as
Does
don't
matter.
take that
Don't
and run with
clip
it.
that out.
Don't clip
Don't
that
clip that
bite.
That's an area not to be creative in, is in the interpret. Yeah. Okay. So Paul tells thieves, if you once stole, you should now make something with your hands and give it away. And there was something about me going, I feel like I'm being a bad steward of the time and the skills that God has given me to spend so much time in something that produces nothing. That I was like, I want to make something with my hands, and I'm going to give it away. And that's I have and do, but when I started, it was like, okay, what do I want to do? And then I just remembered, like, my cousins growing up, that they did something that I used to think was cool. I YouTubed it, and that was it. And I was like, found tutorials, and off I went. And, there have been expressions of creativity in that, but it wasn't like this, I went and bought a blank canvas and some colors, and then I like blacked out a room and like stayed in there until something incredible came out. Like, it wasn't like that. It was a YouTube tutorial telling me how to do everything. And still to this day, I'm often following tutorials or like that kind of thing. Like, I'm not studying color theory. I could. That stuff's actually a little interesting to me, but you grow into that. The starting point could be just a willingness in listening to this to realize that there is actually something in all of us that I think it's good to exercise.
Yeah.
I think it does draw us towards God. I think it's a great way to glorify Him. And I think there's an aspect of the other side of it, which is the repression of all of these things. It's almost always because of a fundamental fear. And like, if there's no outlet for this in your life, it may reflect that there's a part of you that is like being crushed, and there's another part of it where to explore this in a way of just wanting to seek God and lay something before Him. That may unlock all sorts of things that have nothing to do with how good of a drawer or interior designer or green thumb or whatever else you might end up being. Yeah.
It's so funny because when I think about this too, like for me, I think problem solving, like that's creativity. If you know how to take a difficult situation and find a way out of it, you're creative. Like, and when I think about my life and all the times that I felt in a corner, or like the odds were stacked against me or whatever it may be, and I've had to be creative to figure out how to get out of blank.
Yeah.
Or how to do something because the way I did it before didn't work. I don't know, your healthcare changed, whatever. Like if you have to figure out how to make those changes, like that all is like created a sense of desperation in me that draws me back to the Father, that brings me back to Him to say, okay, Lord, where do I go? How do I start? Which brings me back to that source that we talked about in the beginning. Like, and it's a reminder of like, He has made me to figure these things out. He has made me to have a mind that is so complex to do all of these things. And so like, I just am always so encouraged when people talk about, you know, like how they figure things out or how they do things. Like there is a person on our staff who I have no idea what he does for a living. I am continually perplexed. But every time he talks about it.
Staff?
Yes, Ben Anderson.
Oh, yeah. Got it.
His mind is a mystery to me.
Yeah.
He's so smart. It is insane.
He is very smart.
And creative in a way that I could never possibly imagine. And so he has kind of like redefined my boundaries of what is creativity because
That's cool.
I could take something to him and he could figure it out. I also could take something to Roxy and she could put it on paper in a way.
Yeah.
And so never downplay your creativity or how you are gifted or whatever God has given you. But it's also that reminder that like we are called to be creative in a way because we have a creator. And I've loved this topic because I do think there are so many people who go, that's not me. I don't fit in that box. And I'm calling you out.
All right, so
It's
look, I'm
calling out
gonna
something
put Blair on the spot here.
Yeah.
Are we ready?
Blair, can we ask you a question?
Yeah, Blair. I want people that are listening to this podcast to show us what they like.
What they create?
Yeah, what their
Ooh, I
creative
love
stuff is.
that
Whether
idea.
whether it's something they're already doing, or
Yeah.
whether if they feel inspired and challenged in this to try something. You know, they go and they buy a crochet set or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, almost
just,
like
like, show me
croquet,
how
but
you
that's
create.
the
Like, what
that's
do
the
you do?
mallet
Yeah.
and the
Show me what
ball,
you
right?
create. That's a fun idea. Let's do it.
But how do they do that?
Okay.
That's me putting you on the spot.
Everyone,
How would one do
this
that?
is how you can do it. You can email us online at compassionchristian.com.
Online at
compassionchristian.com. It will be in the
Yeah.
episode notes too. I will put it in there
Yeah.
for you guys. So
I'm
all you have to do
excited.
is copy, paste, email us. That'll be fine.
Yeah.
We have to start though. You guys have to put something in that we can show.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
Okay.
Well, Roxy, this doesn't.
I physically-
No,
the
I'm-
comparison
no, I
tab
actually-
is already starting for
no,
me.
I'm not going to do something that is my job. I'm going
No,
to do
it's
something that I
her
do
outfit.
outside.
She's already brought
She
it.
submitted her outfit.
She
Valid.
brought it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is fun, Marcus. I like this challenge. Okay, but here's why we
I
started.
want haikus. I want so many haikus. I do.
Write a
I
song,
want,
sing it.
Yes, I want.
We're gonna
I
do it in
want.
worship
I
next
want
week.
freestyle
Send
rap. I want haikus. Yes,
And
I
we're
want.
gonna
I
have
want
a
pine
makeup
cone art.
tutorials?
I want,
Creative.
yes, ASMR.
No, please do not
wave
send that.
wave files
what
of.
ASMR is? We'll talk after that.
Okay.
I'm hoping Blair gets some
that, like
weird
doing that right there.
Marcus is like, I don't have to monitor that email. Go ahead, do
Ooh.
whatever.
The world's
Okay.
best paper airplane. Oh, and show me how you did it if you can do
Oh,
it.
origami! I love origami.
Yeah.
So many different things we can see. Okay,
Yeah.
send them to online at compassionchristian.com.
Mm-hmm.
And we will share them because here's what we're going to do over the next course of several weeks here. We are going to talk about God's creativity and how he has uniquely gifted people. So we're going to run through a series of the different spiritual giftings and talk through them a little bit, and then hopefully meet some people who've got those giftings
I'm excited.
that we can kind of like use as, hey, how do you operate in this on a daily basis? And so we're going to walk through that together. And it's also, I think, a helpful conversation because so often we focus on our own giftings and don't realize on how we can use those gifts to also other gifts that maybe we haven't been given, or how we can lean into certain things other ways. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense
Yeah.
to me.
I am actually excited for this because I think we're going to learn so much about who God is and who he's made us to be, and the beauty of all of us coming together as the body of Christ, and what that means and what it looks like. So, okay, that was me
like those
going
are
on a
gonna be some
rant.
good
I am
questions.
really excited about it.
Hey.
Heyo.
Yes. What'd you say?
I said I feel like these are going to be some good questions.
Which should be
know
a
when-
hard cut right there. Hard cut.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for joining us with love and curiosity in your heart. We are grateful you guys came. Thank you, Roxy, for joining us. Marcus, always great to have you. And go
Glad to
be
be here.
creative, folks. We'll see you.
Send us stuff.
Yeah. Bye.